Welcome to this short video on analyzing text. In this lecture, we're going to talk about finding the real message in a sea of information. Now, as we talk about text, we're not talking about text messages. We're talking about the written word. So we're talking about all kinds of different um, kinds of written word, things that are out there for us to read and understand. So we live in a big information age. I mean, from the time you get up in the morning, you're checking your phone, you can log into the internet, you can read about your favorite sports figure or star, you can read about some kind of weather that's developing. There's all kinds of information out there. Even when you're watching a football game or baseball game, there are ads that are computer generated that reflect on the mound or the end zone or on flyers or banners behind the action. So everywhere we go, we're getting information. Now, we have to be very careful, and we have to be what's called an analytical reader. When we're reading a magazine article or a blog or a newspaper or looking at a particular website or reading information someone's posted, from another source on social media, when we look at advertisements, political documents, or ads, even your textbook, you have to be a careful analytical reader. You cannot believe everything you read, so you have to be very careful about trying to weed through maybe the interesting, attention getting language or visuals to get to the real message. And then you have to be able to decide whether you agree with that message. So let's talk a little bit about text. I mentioned before that, we're not talking about text messages and texting. In the academic world, when we talk about text, that can include not only writing, so words or pieces of writing. It can also include images. And that's one of the things that we really are inundated with in our world today, and that's images. So the images may be photographs. They could be pictures or illustrations. Um, Along with written words or without. They could be videos, films, and even sculptures, buildings, and music or other sounds. So all of these in our academic world are what we refer to when we're talking about text. When you read the assigned readings this week, some of those readings are going to have not only words and paragraphs, they're going to have a chart added in or a picture added in. And it's important that you read not only the words, but you read the picture. The picture has some significance to that text, to what you were reading. Now, there are many types of text combinations, right? Some types of text do combine the words with images. Some also have sounds. So much of what we read today or experience today is what we call multimedia. You not only have maybe the printed words on some platform, whether that be paper or whether that be your computer screen or your phone screen, but usually there are going to be images and there are going to be sounds. A lot of interesting things happening with multimedia. So whenever we talk about text in the academic world, we're talking about that piece of writing and any images or sounds that might be included. Not only does text convey information, but it also influences how or what we think. Um, Anytime we're in a political season, there are so many messages that are being sent to us. There are visuals, there are words, there's sounds. All of this has a purpose. And remember what I've told you from week one. Everyone writes for a purpose. The same is true in an advertisement or an article that someone's written. They're writing it for a purpose, and many times they're trying to influence you in what you think. So we have to read then to understand not only what that text is saying, but also how they say it and how they're trying to persuade or influence what we think. So think about that for a minute. There are people who make their livelihood, it's their career to influence you. All right, whether those are political speechwriters, whether those are advertising companies that are creating the ads for a particular product. Some of those advertisements, let's say on TV, some of the commercials you see, some of them are funny and some of them make you happy and some of them aggravate you because you just don't understand why how anybody could write an ad that dumb, right? um, when you think about um, that ad, you have to think beyond the ad. You have to think, what is the message? Sure, they want me to buy this insurance, but what is the message of using an emu to do that, right? What are they trying to, how are they trying to convince me? What are they trying to persuade me? Everyone has a mission when they write, okay? So you just have to be very careful. So we've gone past, you're a college student. We've gone past just reading something to understand it, all right? You always want to read something to understand it first, but then you want to go back and you want to dissect it, as we've been doing this semester in the readings that we've done, and you want to figure out what is the writer really saying. And then the next step after that is, how do I feel about that message? Do I agree with that message? Do I embrace that message? Or does this message give me another thought that is counter to what this person is trying to tell me? So you need to be reading to understand, figuring out what that message, the hidden message is, and figuring out how you feel about that and how you would respond. Responding to text. Because understanding how texts say what they say, and by doing so achieve their effect, that's very crucial. You need to understand what it is someone's saying in their writing, and you also need to figure out how they said it and how they achieve this effect. Um, you might be asked in some of your classes, including this one, to analyze a text. Um, you could be in history class and you could be analyzing a letter that's written by Alexander Hamilton to Aaron Burr. You could be reading a great speech from Abraham Lincoln. So you're not only looking at what that person said in the context of that history and that time on a timeline, but also figuring out how what they said is crucial, how their writing technique allowed them to create a certain effect and impact people. And then you might be asked, after you've done that reading and thinking, you might be asked to write a paper about um, the impact of the Gettysburg Address, or what can be um, seen about the relationship between Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr in those letters that were exchanged between the two gentlemen during a course of time. So in history, you might be asked to write a paper in response to a text. In science, you might be asked to um, evaluate an article that you had read that was dealing with some biological issue and some new theory about something, and then you could be asked to respond um, and analyze the findings of that article. Um, when you think about analysis, that's what our goal has been all along. We want you to go beyond reading something superficially to understanding it at a greater depth and then having an opinion about it and responding um, to something that you have read. It's kind of like you can hear a conversation that your parent is having with you. And at the time, you think you understand it. And later, you think about it a little further. And maybe you realize that you agree with some of the things that are being said, but disagree with other parts of that, right? And you might bring that back up in conversation later. That's you responding to text. You're doing that verbally, right? The text was what had been said in that conversation. Sometimes you read something and it immediately makes you angry, or it makes you excited because you agree with what you're reading. Whether you agree or disagree doesn't matter. That response that you give is you examining um, not only what was said, but how it was said, that has given you an idea um, about something. Sometimes we hear something or read something, and it is what I call the leaping off place. It is what makes us start to think about some other facet of that discussion, some other part of that. From what we read, it gives us this really cool idea about life, or baseball, or whatever the topic may have been. It may not be, we're not just regurgitating what was said and what we read. No, we're taking those ideas and expanding on them, building on them, arguing against them, whatever the case may be. So responding to text is after you've read, after you've experienced this ad, after you've experienced whatever form of text or images or sounds or whatever, then you responding to that. For those of you that love music, whether it's, more of a orchestra type, band type music, or whether it is, um, a singer or a group singing, the lyrics sometimes of a song, you can hear the song for the first time and it starts you thinking. We've all had that experience where we heard this one song and it's like compelling. There's parts of the song we're not sure we understand, so we have to hear it again. You might ask a friend, hey, what do you think this means? And you and the friend might have two very different ideas about what that means. Well, and then you start to explain why you think it means that. And the friend says, well, when I heard this part, I thought this meant something different. So you're looking at something with almost like a different pair of glasses. You've read it and now you're analyzing it, thinking about it, and creating sometimes a very unique point of your own that you support by responding to something that you read. All right. So when it comes to analyzing a text, it allows you, as we mentioned, to formulate your own ideas about that subject based on what you read. And your ideas can be very different, but by reading that, it sparked this idea of your own. So one reason we analyze a text is to give you that opportunity to grow your brain, for you to have your own ideas about something. Um, Another reason that we analyze text, or another benefit of analyzing a text, is to allow you to support your view based on those arguments and supports that you saw in the text. Sometimes we believe something so very different from what we've just read. But even though we feel differently than the writer of that text, reading that information and seeing their arguments gives us the opportunity to build our own and support it with some of the stuff that we feel is so false in what we just read. Or maybe you agree with the writer, but again, you're kind of expanding on and creating a different or bigger idea of your own. In either case, you can use some of the support from that text. Analyzing a text also allows you to think more deeply about a subject. You know, a lot of us have this very base knowledge about things. We don't know how we know it. We don't know when we learned it. It's kind of like watching a game show and knowing the answers. And you don't know how you know those answers. You just do, you know. It's just there in your brain from things you've heard and seen and read all these years. So by analyzing a text, lets you to think more deeply about a subject. You read something and it just makes you think. I used to have one of my best professors ever in graduate school. We would come to class, he would lecture, and at the last 5 minutes, you knew it was coming, but in the last 5 minutes, he would pose this question, knowing we're fixing to walk out the door, and for the next 2 days, all we're going to think about is this question and the answer to it. It was just compelling. But it felt so good to exercise your brain in that way. He would make us think beyond what we had read before class, beyond what he had lectured on. He would throw out this question that left us thinking more deeply about a subject. And a lot of times, and some of you are discovering this with free writing, that as you free write, you start off not really knowing what you're going to end up saying about a particular subject. But by the end of that free writing session, you've suddenly got this deep thought, way deeper than what you started with, by simply writing, and thinking about that subject more deeply. All right, so when we talk about analyzing something, Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines it as the study or to determine the nature or relationship of the parts of something by analysis. And I apologize, I will change that to study to determine. It was late at night when I did this one. So think about what that's saying. You're studying or you're determining the nature or relationships of the parts of something. So basically, when you're analyzing, you're breaking it down into the parts, and you're thinking about it in nature, or in nature to the parts, or the relationships of the parts. So you're thinking about, in order to think about something deeply, sometimes you have to break it down, okay? And think about those parts and how those parts contribute to the big picture. Now, you have several readings that you're going to be doing. One of those is our declaration that's written by Daniel Allen. Now, in this, she's going to focus on the second sentence of the Declaration of Independence, and she's going to unpack its logic through careful examination of that key term, self-evident. She'll explain how the rest of the sentence forms a syllogism that snaps together. She looks carefully at every word. She is breaking it down into the smallest pieces, restricting her analysis here to a very brief part of the text, but providing insight that illuminates the whole document. So from this one, I hope you're going to see that, she has read the Declaration of Independence, and from that entire thing, she is responding. She is analyzing responding to that text by analyzing that one sentence, the second sentence, okay? And zeroing in on self-evident. So from reading the Declaration of Independence, what stuck out to her, what spoke to her at that moment was the second sentence. So she is responding in writing to the text of our declaration, zeroing her point in on the part, that second sentence, okay? So when you look at that, here's an example of some big document, but she's responding to a small part of it. Okay, that's the part that sparked her interest. That's the part that she's going to analyze. All right, your second reading that you'll be doing is called A Spirit Reborn, and this one's by William Safire. Now, his main point in his textual analysis is that after 9/11, as after the bloodbath of the Battle of Gettysburg, there was a national spirit that rose up from the ashes of destruction. So he's going to be connecting the Gettysburg Address and this concept of the national spirit to the time after 9/11. He is going to end his analysis by declaring that Lincoln's address reminds us, the living, of our unfinished work, and that the greatest task remains before us to resolve that this generation's response to the deaths of thousands of our people leads to a new birth of freedom. Okay? So he's read the Gettysburg Address. And from that, while he's reading that, he sees this concept of the Spirit Reborn. And from that, he's thinking about 9/11, and he sees that connection between that Spirit Reborn after 9/11 being very much like that Spirit Reborn after the Gettysburg Address, when the war has killed, civil war has killed so many people. So here's another type of textual analysis where after reading something, you make a connection to something else. So in this case, it's the Gettysburg Address and that spirit of being reborn for the nation and connecting that with the experiences of the aftermath of 9/11. Okay, so a different kind of textual analysis. And then the final textual analysis you're going to read is also going to be one that you're going to use for your own paper. It's going to be kind of a leaping off place for you. All right. So in this one, this is the fashion industry, free to be an individual, and this one was by Hannah Berry. In this textual analysis, she writes an analysis of two visual texts, because remember how we talked about it's not just about reading text. Sometimes it has to do with the visuals, okay, like advertisements. And she writes an analysis of two visual texts. She picks two shoe ads. And this is an actual first year writing course student at Wright State University. So she picks two shoe ads and she does an analysis of those two shoe ads. All right. So hopefully, it is imperative that you read these. And in fact, you've got a quiz on two of these readings. I believe it's just two of these readings. But check your weekly schedule. So you want to make sure that when you read that Our Declaration by Daniel Allen, let me go back to that slide. Make sure that you are reading this, you're annotating, thinking about this and what she's done in the way of analysis and understanding your understanding of this, because there's a little, 10-question quiz on it. Same for A Spirit Reborn by William Safire. Okay, so you're going to want to make sure that you do read before you try to take that quiz. And hopefully you understand these three different types of textual analysis that you're dealing with. This will set you up for your assignment, and I will be talking with you in a separate video about the assignment itself. So this is the end of our brief lecture on textual analysis. I hope this helps you understand what you read in the chapter that was assigned, and I look forward to joining you again soon. Thank you.